Raise your hand if you can hear me. All right, so I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly. We're basically just looking at the three empires that emerged because of Islam. And they all had Islam as a unifying factor. This was something that you have to understand, that even today there are countries, even in Europe, that are unified in some ways by their religion. It's one of the commonalities of people among, people within those countries. The idea of religious freedom as a personal choice for people to make is something it's almost an American invention in a lot of ways. But anyway, so what are these three empires? We're going to look at the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Mughal Empire. The Ottoman Empire is the one that stretches up all the way towards even, we would call this almost the modern day, 1923. Not really the modern day, but into what's called the modern era. And the Ottoman Empire really isn't going to fall apart until World War I. The Safavid Persian Empire is the precursor to modern-day Iran, and that's geographically where they ended up. And the Mughal Empire ruled in modern-day India from 1526 to the mid-1800s. They get sort of pushed out by the British, and we'll look at that a little bit later, though. So here's geographically where they were. Now, if you see from the timeline, there was time where they existed together, and the Ottoman Empire encompassed all of them. But this is a relatively short period where they all existed at the same time. Now, if we could have the full map of the Ottoman Empire, it would extend at one point, at its furthest, all the way to the southern tip of Spain. And this was actually pushing out part of the Ottoman Empire was what the Spanish needed to do to make Spain. And they unified Spain after pushing out the Ottomans. Okay, so that's basically where these empires were. And yeah. Okay, let's talk Ottoman Empire. So the major ruler that we would talk about was Suleiman. Yeah, he was the first major ruler. Now, the Ottoman Empire was named after he was a whoa. Let's not use any foul language, please. My microphone might pick it up. There we go. I'm glad I have a 910 because I haven't used any of these classes recordings yet. Oh, did we? Yeah, we did. We did. No, it was the computer that time. Okay, Ottoman Empire. You won't need your phones during the lecture. So you had Suleiman. Now, in the thing about, or one of the things about Islam is that there's often, it's hard to separate in a lot of ways religion and politics. That's probably true for any religion. The difference is that Christianity and Judaism and Islam is kind of undergoing this, but in a lot of ways underwent a time where people talked about splitting the religious from the political, where you can now get in the United States as the result of this, the idea of the separation of church and state, the idea that the government cannot tell you to do what in terms of your religious beliefs for the most part, and that religious beliefs really shouldn't have an impact on political decisions. But that's not the case back in these times, and with Islam especially, like he said, Christ never set up a government and tried to run a country, but Muhammad did. So after he dies, political stuff, government, and religious stuff are sort of tied together. And so with the Ottomans, you had a person. Ooh, excuse me. The political leader was both the Sultan and the Caliph, the religious leader. This is Ottoman architecture, but it's not originally Ottoman architecture. This is the Hagia Sophia, which is in Constantinople. Well, it was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. So the Islamic edition, the Ottoman edition, are these minarets. The minarets are used, they have an important function. They're not just built to be tall towers, but because the 5 daily prayers are at certain times of the day based on where the sun is, um, the call to prayer, what if ever they show a movie about the Middle East or that has anything to do with Islam in it, they always show somebody getting on top of a minaret and giving the call to prayer. And they typically only do the first line or two, but that's when you know the setting is a Middle Eastern country somewhere. But the minarets are used for that because Islam was originally it's a religion based around cities. So the way to get everybody in the city to know that it's time to pray together was to get somebody at the top of a really tall tower with a big solid set of lungs and have them call out this call to prayer. Modern day, because the cities get bigger, they may use loudspeakers, but that construction was the Ottomans installed that. This was originally a Byzantine Christian church. Okay, so Suleiman was called the lawgiver because he created laws to govern many different types of peoples. Most attempts to create empires that are exclusively one religion or another usually fail because people just believe differently for some reason. It might not be easy to explain, but they do. So when Suleiman took over this huge empire, he had to figure out, okay, what are my choices? I could tell everybody they have to convert. How am I going to enforce that? And within Islam, there's also a respect for what are called people of the book, Christians and Jews. Now, the interpretations differ as to how far that respect extends, but in Suleiman's case, he was willing to allow non-Muslims to worship as they pleased, as long as they were politically loyal to him. Now, important to understand, that was Jews and Christians. This did not extend to someone. You couldn't be a Wiccan or, a polytheist or something. That was not allowed. As long as you believed in the one God, that was acceptable. But beyond that, your religious freedom was not guaranteed. In addition, Muslims and Jews under the Ottoman Empire, Jews and Christians, often had to pay a tax. So it wasn't a crushing tax, but the idea is that, I guess it was an incentive to convert, basically, and plus it raised money. So he also reformed the administration of his country, created new laws to make it run better. Long story short, the Ottoman Empire started to decline around the 1600s. It really doesn't hit bottom until just before World War I. And when World War I hits, the Ottoman Empire basically collapses. When you look at a modern-day map of the Middle East, most of what you're looking at was carved out of the Ottoman Empire when World War I ended. So if you look at the nation of Iraq or what was Palestine or Jordan or Syria, those weren't countries that were created by people that are like, hey, we're Iraqis, hey, we're Syrians. It was created when the British, French, and the United States drew lines on a map to divide up the Middle East to be colonies, basically. Okay, let's talk Persia. Shah Abbas is really the big ruler there. Now, whereas the Ottomans are Sunni Muslim, the Persians are Shiite Muslim. So they have a different, this is not so much a religious disagreement, it's a disagreement, well, it is a religious disagreement, but it's also about politics, about who should be leading the Islamic community on earth. Anyway, so because the Ottomans were Sunni, the Persians often made alliances with European countries against them. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Persian was a language still used in Iran today. They gradually declined until about 1722. That won't be the modern nation of Iran, but that will be some more Europeans coming in to colonize. Okay, so that's real quick about the Persians. How about the Mughals? Now they're in northern India, what we would call northern India, basically. Now, when we say later that the British are taking over India, again, you have to remember, there's not everybody here. In fact, almost nobody here, if you ask them, what are you? In the way that we would say, I'm an American, they wouldn't have said, I'm an Indian. They would have said, well, I'm a subject of the Mughal Empire. I'm there were so many ways that people could identify themselves that this is not India, okay? Just the way this isn't Iran right here. It's not Iran. Just the way if you go over anywhere, England's not really, well, it's sort of England, but that idea comes later. Okay, so what about the Mughals? They have an empire. Babur is one of the one of the big Mughal emperors. Was a good leader too. Expanded government and the arts. Rock on. Then you get Akbar. Okay, so he brings peace and order to the Mughal Empire. He's got the same issue of I rule over different people of different beliefs. What he's ruling over, not too many Christians or Jews, but a fair amount of, in fact, the majority are Hindus. He has Muslim subjects, but he also has Hindu subjects. The real conflict here between the belief systems is that are Hindus monotheistic, one God, or polytheistic, many gods? Polytheistic. So you don't even have the same thing that you have with Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, where at least they all believe in the same God and only one of them. Hinduism is a little stickier because there's no way, if anybody's right, only one of them can be right. So let's put it that way. Yeah, the Hinduism involves many different gods. Again, all ones that fulfill different parts of the sort of way the universe works. There's gods for creating and destroying and things like that. Anyway, so how's he gonna keep this all together? Because this conflict between Muslims and Hindus still has repercussions today. When they finally make India independent, they have to split it into two countries, into a Hindu India and an Islamic Pakistan. Anyway, so he encouraged religious tolerance. That was what he was going to try to do. And that works for a while, but didn't work for long enough. He also thought that if he invited religious scholars to his capital and he sat them all down, that what they could do is sort of create almost like a super religion, like one that took all the best parts and beliefs of all different ones and created a new one. He tried that out, but it didn't really hang on too long. He encouraged learning. This is the most famous building in Mughal architecture. This is the Taj Mahal. This isn't a palace. This is actually a tomb for the emperor's wife. Yeah. Well, if you're rich. All right. So by the 1600s, what you start to get in the area we call India, you've got Hindu rebellions. You've also got a new emerging religion called Sikhism. Sikhism still exists up to the modern day. If you see, typically Sikh men will wear the sword. We call it a turban. I'm not sure what the correct word is for it, but the wrapped turban and the long beards. That man may be a Sikh. He's not Hindu. He's not Muslim. Not that Hindus and Muslims don't grow beards or anything like that, but typically that might be what you see. So you've got a third religion into the mix there that is different enough from the other two that they don't agree with it. So most Indians held on to their Hindu customs. Some converted to Islam, some didn't. The later Mughal rulers figure out that religious tolerance is not the way to go. And in many cases, they started to try to force Hindus to convert. Okay, so why do these empires eventually decline? And it's that when the European countries show up in these territories, these empires don't have the strength to resist them in a lot of cases. First off, with whatever happens with like kings and queens and emperors, is often if it just gets passed down through your family, ability better be hereditary. Because if somebody, not everybody in your family is smart and capable and hardworking. So sooner or later, you're going to hit somebody that's not very good at their job, and that doesn't help. And then you get people trying to take over. Some people think that the fact they were all land empires meant that they didn't focus on building up navies. And so when other countries showed up with navies, it was hard to fight them off, basically. Finally, if you'd went to anywhere in the world in, say, 1300 or 1400, and you would look for the most powerful countries, it was these. Some people think that being the most powerful empires in the world gave them a sort of superiority complex. So when Europeans show up, they thought, well, they don't really have much to offer us.
As some people say, the bigger the empire, the more.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, it's absolutely. I think that's true in a lot of ways, and a country's ability to sort of fight off those attacks becomes important. So, okay, that was as fast as I could make it.
It's a Death Star.
What's that?
That term is called a Death Star.
Death Star.